Hey everyone, this is Disc Junkie and welcome back to Secondhand Sickness. So today I'm off to visit an acquaintance which I met up with many years ago, and this is a guy who used to work in a X-rated bookshop back in the day, like back in the 80s. This guy was working together with Kurt Håsson, who is a very sort of famed Swedish distributor of pornography through the 60s, 70s and 80s, and I've talked about him many times. And so I've been at this sort of warehouse before, or this sort of storage unit which this guy has, where he keeps a lot of stuff. And you know, I've already visited this place twice and usually came back with a lot of cool books and stuff. And so I don't think there's too much left that he might have that might interest me. But for whatever reason, I reached out to him because I was looking for some X-rated magazines. And he said that he was sort of clearing out like the last of the stuff in the storage. So I wasn't really sure what he meant by that, but I felt like, okay, so I'm gonna go there, take one last look, see if there's anything left that I might have missed. And so that's what I'm doing now. So we're gonna drive over there and, well, then we'll just see what we can find. So stay tuned.
Swagger down the street with your red lips and funky beat. You better hold your head up to the sky. I'm gonna roll with you till the day I die. Hey, swing those hips around. Can't stop, roll back down. My ladies, short, tall, thin or wide, always down and ready to ride.
Hej! Ja, du gick in från andra hållet. Jag väntade på att det skulle komma någon bil. Ja, du har plockat ut lite.
Vet du vad?
Nej.
Jag är lite dålig med dem. Jag håller på att leta överallt, men de där två som du gick hittade jag.
Ja.
Men det finns allt annat.
Ja, men vi kikar lite. Alright, so I'm back at the table and it's high time to check out the finds of today. And I gotta say that I came home with a much bigger lot than I originally expected. Now I'm going to start with a stack of magazines which are from a series that was known as Ero. And I have shown some of these before. In fact, if you want to see like what type of content this has and sort of get a feel for the style, you can actually check out the link in the video description where I have a fully XXX rated walkthrough or sort of review unboxing of the first ever issue of this magazine. And this was actually the magazine that triggered or sort of started my general interest in vintage erotica when I found it at a sort of local car boot sale kind of thing for auto parts, and they had these old magazines there. And so check out that in the video description if you want to see a more uncensored look of what these magazines are like. But these are some magazine issues from Ero that I didn't have from before, and so I was really happy to pick these up. And truth of the matter is that I had essentially bundled together a whole bunch of stuff. Then he gave me the total price for that, and then when I tried to haggle with him, instead of haggling the price down, he just said like, you know what, I can add more stuff. And he added a batch of these Ero magazines simply because, as he put it, he didn't really want them and he felt that they were sort of hard to sell because sometimes they are a bit borderlining as to sort of, they're not just generic porn, they're usually very sort of kinky. In fact, you know, this magazine actually had its own tagline that was Sweden's kinkiest magazine. So yeah, I'm not saying there's anything illegal here, but I think generally it's a bit more than what most people would enjoy. I'll just leave it at that. So in any case, I'm gonna show you some of these. They are obviously gonna have to be censored, and you know what? I'm actually not gonna look at the back at all because these are so explicitly themed that I didn't even have the energy to sort of censor the entire back because there's just too much nudity on the back. So we're just gonna go ahead and look at the front covers. So here's the first one. I don't know exactly what year this is from, but I would guess it's from the 80s based on the style of the covers. Or maybe late 70s, I don't know. So I'll just run through these, and I've obviously centered these with some post-it notes, but here you at least do get a feel of the style. And I mean, if you're into this, I can definitely suggest, or you know, not sure if I would suggest it, but if you are into this kind of stuff, this is definitely an odd magazine which had a quite a long run. And like I said, yeah, I mean, if you're calling yourself Sweden's kinkiest magazine, you can expect there will be some bizarre stuff in there. And so I wouldn't say I'm generally a collector of this, but if I find them for cheap, I don't mind picking them up. I don't know how long this ran, but you know, the longer the run goes into like the 80s, the covers tend to become more and more ugly, in my opinion. I definitely prefer the early ones. And the first issue that I got, I think, is just beautiful in its own bizarre way. But like I said, if you want to see more details of that, you can check the link in the video description. So this was the first haul of today. Essentially 5 Aero magazines. So I'll just keep these on the side for now. Try to get everything in frame once we're done. So yeah, that is the first batch of stuff of the day. Next up, we have something which I only got one issue of, and it's a small paper style pamphlet almost, which is called Homo Orgy number 156. And this doesn't have anything on the back, but I literally can't even open this because it is extremely hardcore. This is essentially just like the title suggests. It's a homo orgy, so this is gay themed towards men, and it just says homosexual color pornography. So we're not even gonna flip through this at all because I just, you know, I can't even censor it because there's too much. Like, you know, one picture would just be full of post-its, and I can't really do it. But you can just imagine what vintage 1970s gay porn actually looks like. It is definitely not mild. Let's just leave it at that. So this I definitely want to pick up, and I will say that when I'm looking at vintage porn, trying to collect stuff, if I find vintage gay themed stuff, especially male gay themes, that is usually worth the price because it's actually highly collectible, especially stuff from the 70s, because it's really hard to find. And back in those days, it was also much less accepted than it is today. I mean, being gay back in those days wasn't really as easy as it is now. I mean, not to say that people who are gay now don't get sort of persecuted in some instances, but generally, like, the general consensus in society as it is now is definitely more open towards the gay community. That is all I'm saying. Whereas back in those days, when this was printed, you would probably have to buy this like under the counter. It would probably be very sort of, you know, stuff you don't want to talk about, and you probably wouldn't want to get caught with this because it could be very sort of sensitive. And you know, that's just all I'm gonna say. I mean, it's not like this is something illegal, not at all, but it's just like back in those days, being gay was not the same as being gay today, in my opinion. You know, not that I'm gay, but yeah, you get the idea. So next up, I have another batch of magazines which are from the same series, and this was a series I've never actually heard about, which is called Dream. And this is a bilingual magazine, but I think it's produced in Sweden. And interesting about this one, which I thought was probably like the most beautiful or stylized cover, just has this girl's face on it and not really very explicit. But this one I actually found 2 issues of, and they look kind of the same, but if you look closely, there's actually a name printed down here, which says Leena Skoog.
You got a funny accent. Where do you come from?
Sweden.
Oh, Sweden!
And now for a brief history on Leena Skoog. She was born in 1951 and was essentially a nude model, a singer and an actress who was first noticed after she did a photo series in a Swedish men's magazine back in the 1960s. She got her first role in 1969 where she played a bit of a striptease role in a short film, and after that she did primarily the same types of roles up until 1974 when she landed the role of Leslie in an episode of the British comedy series Bless This House. And in parallel to acting, she also had a brief music career where she released 2 singles, and for another music connection she was actually married to Alan Whitehead, who was the drummer of the Scottish pop group Marmalade. And even though Leena might not have achieved the international fame that she had hoped for, she did actually star in the 1972 movie 4 Dimensions of Greta, and she was also featured in the movies Go Girl from 1972 Up the Front from 1972. And at this point you might be wondering, why are we spending so much time talking about Leena Skoog? And the simple truth is that I saw this name and I just felt interested in looking up who this person actually was, because I think it's very easy to actually forget that these people are real people. And another thing I learned as I was researching this is that Leena Skoog actually passed away in 1998. She was actually just 47 years old and ended up passing away of cancer. And I was just really sad to realize that this had happened to her, and I just hope that in some way she managed to achieve what she wanted in life, because I think that at some point we're all just gonna be, you know, lost to the pages of history. And hopefully now you learned something about Leena Skoog, which you probably didn't know already. But I'm rambling, and I'm sorry that this became so sentimental and weird, but I just felt that I wanted to do something different for once and actually look up who this person was. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed that odd little bizarro flashback thing. But in any case, weirdly about these is that I just flip open to the first page. It's essentially different. So this says number 1 1969. This says number 1, but then it says copyright 1974. So presumably this is a reissue, but it's also weird, like it would get reissued in 1974 if it was originally printed in 1969. Because the thing is that aside from this first fold-out, the magazine is identical. And I'm not even sure if we can show... Yeah, I can show you some pages. Like there is essentially like this photo series, which starts out just like black and white. Yeah, we can show one more page because I thought this was kind of a cool image. Like it's a very really sort of artistic and awesome looking photo series. Like there's this sort of black and white and they're holding the Gideon's like a baby doll and stuff like that. And yeah, so I'm sorry if I'm going a bit slow, but I sort of have to peek on every page to see. Yeah, we really can't go beyond this because now it turns into sort of a very sort of pornographic material. But like you can see, like the entire magazine is essentially the same aside from that first page. So yeah, I mean, when I first grabbed these, I just picked 2 copies because I felt like they were really beautiful and I thought I would probably be able to sell it if I didn't want to keep the duplicate. Then when I got home and checked it and realized, oh, it's actually not the same print, I sort of figured that I would probably want to keep this. And another interesting detail about this is that this magazine is from 1969, and this is pretty much the time when Leena was first discovered as a model. And so this wasn't done in this magazine, but I can imagine that when this was published, she probably wasn't very famed. And so with that, this magazine might actually be a bit of a collectible, seeing as this is a rather sort of unknown photo series of Leena, who would actually turn out to be something of a semi-famous person in Sweden at the time. But yeah, it's a beautiful magazine and I'm really happy about this. I think this cover shot is awesome. Just a really, really beautiful girl, and it's a very stylized, artistic shot. And I have to say that generally, you know, I definitely prefer this kind of cover art towards this, like the most sort of more extreme stuff. You know, this to me can be sort of sensual and sexy and sort of beautiful, whereas looking at this sort of late era 80s stuff, which just isn't beautiful at all. Like it's moving very much towards cringe to me, and very much sort of I don't know, want to say disgusting, but it's like, it's just a very sort of ugly type of porn. And obviously there is a interest in that as well, or fascination, but generally I definitely much more prefer to collect this kind of stuff, and even like the home orgy stuff, which just has like a suggestive image on the front rather than having stuff like this. So yeah, so in any case, let's just go ahead and check some of the other covers for the Dream magazine. So here is another one, and I have actually censored back just to be able to show you. You can see that it is essentially hardcore. And here is another one. Gonna flip that over as well. Sort of a weird, naked, middle-aged man, bald, carrying a sex doll, which looks really ugly. Let's look at that. All right. And then finally we have this one, which I also thought was quite beautiful. And there is actually some blowjob action on the back. So yeah, definitely a very sort of mixed magazine in that the covers are quite sort of not really extreme, but you know, there are some boobs and stuff, but it's generally not a very sort of explicit cover art. And then you have the back, which can definitely be a bit more explicit, so to speak. And now I want to move on to looking at some books, which are probably my favorite pickups of the day. And this was something that he actually had quite a lot of. I think he had like 2 or 3 boxes full of books, which were all sort of from the same series, sort of in the same style. And I mean, I would have bought this entire lot of books, but it's just way too much money. And you know, I'm not saying that they're not worth the money he wanted, but it's just like, I mean, I can't spend that much at a single time. And so it's quite possible that I'm going to be selling some of these books depending on what I can get for them, but I didn't really get any duplicates. I essentially just bought a small batch to have some to save for myself, because I think they are actually really awesome books. And so yeah, let's just go ahead and check this out. So the first book that I got is something which is called The Memoirs of Lady Birch. And I'm actually going to show these images, seeing as this is actually illustrated, it's not a photo, and so I don't really think there's any sort of issue in terms of YouTube guidelines. I mean, I would consider this as art rather than, you know, it's not a pornographic photo, and by that standard it should be okay to show this. And so this is an illustrated book, obviously X-rated illustrations, but it's essentially an erotic novel which does feature some illustrations. Or actually no, there's actually just one sort of cover illustration, and then there's just text inside. So this is a Swedish print. But what was interesting about this is that I never heard about this sort of Lady Birch series, but apparently, you know, just the other day after I picked this up, I stumbled over another Lady Birch book, which is pretty much the same. It's a very sort of BDSM oriented illustration, sort of sexy novel. But I bought this other book, which I haven't gotten delivered yet, but it was weird, sort of strange synchronicity that I just stumbled over this, and then I stumbled over another one. But what was really curious about this particular title is that this book, which is like brand new, looks like it hasn't even been touched, and I'm pretty sure this is quite an old print, but there's no copyright in this. There's no year, there's no copyright of the company that printed it. It essentially has no fine print, just has the text. And so I asked the seller about this, if he knew anything about the history of this particular book, and he said he wasn't sure, but based on the fact that it didn't have any sort of copyright on it, he assumed that this might actually be a print by Kurt Håsson, who, you know, is a distributor that I collect, because he said that back in those days, like if you didn't actually have copyright, he knew for a fact that sometimes Kurt Håsson would actually print books without copyright info in it, because that way he could sort of get away with releasing them, even though he didn't really have the copyright for them, because people wouldn't go digging into it. So I don't know if that's true, and I have no idea who actually published or printed this, but seeing as it was there and I've never seen one before, I can't even find any info online when I Google for this. I thought it was definitely worth the pick up, seeing as it's such a brand new sort of mint condition copy, and definitely a very unusual book. But this is sort of in the same style and the same theme as the other books I have, which I actually decided to pick up. But the majority of these are actually in English. But I'm going to start with one more book, which is a Swedish translation of this type of series. And this is a book which is called Skrik av smärta, which would be Cries of Pain. And this is also an illustrated book, obviously very sort of BDSM oriented. And just checking the back, this is from a company called Atlantis, but it's part of a book series which is called the Tortura book. And I'm pretty sure that this is a translation of an international series which is from a company called Tortura Press. And I actually have a few more of those, so we are going to compare those and just look at what sort of the style looks like. You will see that they are quite similar. I can bring this out right away. So here is another book which is an English or international title, which is called Cycle Bondage, but you can see that this is from Tortura Press. So obviously, just based on the similar cover design, these are probably a Swedish translation of the same series. So this is the Swedish version, which has, apart from the cover art, it also has illustrations within the book, but these are never sort of photos, they're always just illustrations. And this kind of stuff really reminds me of, you know, illustrators like Eric Stanton, for example, which I talked about before. But generally, just I think this is primarily the reason for why these books are so collectible in my mind, because it comes from these sort of very classic artists and illustrators which have become known for this particular style of art and this particular sort of style of themes, I suppose. But I have no idea who illustrated this. It says that the book itself, or the novel, is by Bert Will. I assume that is some sort of pseudonym for something. So original title is apparently Nympho Bondage, translated by a Gimbert Samas, and this is printed 1974. There's no info about the illustrator there. So I think that's also part of this. Like, a lot of these illustrated books don't even have like info about the illustrator. So yeah, no idea about the history of this, but I have seen this type of Swedish translation of these books before, and that is primarily what I'm interested in. I mean, I think that these international books are obviously also very, very cool, and these are essentially in the same style. So just looking a little bit at this, you can see that we have similar type of black and white illustrations. And you know, I'm not generally into BDSM, but I think it's just generally a very sort of collectible subgenre in porn, because a lot of the time it is kind of, you know, not illegal per se, but just that it's generally sort of hush-hush and something that's kept under the counter. And so back in these days, like we're talking back in the 70s or earlier, these kind of books would probably have been sort of hard to come by. Like, it's not stuff that's being sold in every sort of bookshop, or even like if it's an erotic bookshop, I don't think this would be the kind of book that you would find everywhere. And so seeing this stuff today, especially in mint condition like this, is just amazing. So like I said, he had like at least 2 or 3 full boxes of these type of pocket books, but I can't buy that much stuff. So I'm gonna talk about the pricing for all of these once I'm done with them. But let's just go ahead and check out some of the other books. So here is more from the Tortura Press series. This one is called Jet Bondage. And I'm just going to flip through this at random and show you some of the illustrations, because I'm guessing that's the kind of stuff that's most interesting. But yeah, just to give you a variety of the stuff. Now, I have no idea if these books were illustrated by the same guy, but this is obviously from the same series, the Tortura Press. You can see from the sort of similarities on the cover design, which is, you know, that's something I really appreciate. Just like having a series which sort of has such a coherent cover design in terms of like the whole illustrated, the circle, just generally using a coherent style with different images to them. I just think that's always a very sort of big plus, not just for books but for movies as well. I just think that if you make a great cover design like this as part of a series, I just love that kind of stuff, keeping a coherence to it. And you probably know that's from my videos in, you know, making coherent thumbnails and all that, you know, just it's something that really speaks to my artistic side. Let's just leave it at that. Right, so there we got 3 books from Tortura Press and a Swedish translation called Tortura Book. And yeah, like I said, I'm really running out of room here, so. We have 4 more books we're gonna go through. I'm just gonna lift in this bundle and we're starting to check it out one by one. So this first one is called Fetish Lover. This is from a book series which is called Bizarre Book. And I don't really have any details about this. I mean, I can obviously open it up just to see if there's a copyright. Yeah, there is, but no year. Yeah, 1972, so even earlier, this one. And yeah, this has the same kind of illustrations, but no idea who the actual artist is. Does it say anything? No, it doesn't really seem to have any details about the illustrator. Now I got a bug on the table. God damn it. Okay. So yeah, just checking some of the other ones. And so I mean, these books were definitely like the main prize of the day. Like, I honestly don't hardly care about the Aero magazines after finding these. But like I said, the Aero magazines were pretty much sort of thrown at me when he wanted to haggle the price. So yeah, it's a really awesome one. This is called Cruelta's Casino by Clive Bedford. And I mean, I've tried to Google some of these, and a lot of the titles I can't even find info on. But generally, just finding some titles from like the Bizarre Books or the Tortura Press series, I would say that these are generally worth at least 30 or 40 euro per book. And that's like at a minimum. Sometimes I see books like this listed for like 50 or 60 euro per book. So yeah, we're gonna get back to the prices I paid, but just giving you a bit more of a look at some of the illustrations. So we can see generally most of this is very much in the same theme, like it's a very sort of BDSM torture type subgenre for sure. And so that was 2 books from the Bizarre Book collection. And then I have 2 more, which is from something called Kane Classics. And first one is Night with a Sadist. Also love this very sort of stylized cover with like the very sort of bright pink or skin color tones. Like you can see the same style on these, and I just think these illustrations are also very nice. There's something very sort of fleshy about using these sort of tone and these sort of illustrations or coloring for illustrations, which I quite enjoy. I think it makes for a very sort of naughty looking cover. I almost feel like a cover like this feels more dirty in a way than a cover like this. I don't know why, I just think it's something with this particular sort of skin tone that makes these illustrations really stand out. So yeah, there's a copy of the back, or a shot of the back. But yeah, I think these are very much in the same fashion. This looks a bit more modern almost. I don't know if it is, I just thought that the illustrations looked a bit more modern. Let's see. No, it's actually from 71, so even older. But still can't really find any info about who the illustrator was. So if somebody knows, if somebody recognizes these particular illustrations, do feel free to comment and mention the book title in case you recognize like the style or the look of these illustrations, because it would be interesting to know who actually drew these, just because I think it's interesting to check the history of these books and sort of who the artist actually is. So now we got the last one, which is Slash of the Whip, apparently by some guy named Larry Moore. And here we got the back cover. So you can see that the Kane Classics apparently have a very sort of coherent design to the backs and for the front as well, which I really appreciate. But like I said, this was from 71, and when I was trying to pick these out, I, did get quite a few. I got like 4, 5, 6, 8 books from like the BDSM type category, but he had like 3 boxes. I think each box had like maybe 30 titles in them. So I mean, we're probably talking 90 towards 100 books in total, and it's like, I would have bought all of them if I could, but it would essentially have ruined me, and I literally didn't have that much money on my bank account, because like this guy wasn't about to sell these for pennies, I can just tell you that. Yeah, okay, there was an illustration. Let's see if we can find some more in here. Feels like this wasn't as illustrated as the other ones. There we go, that's something. Okay, so let's just leave it at that. There's obviously a whole bunch of images, and we could go through these forever, it feels like, because there's a whole lot of stuff. But yeah, this is the lot for today, and I have to say that I'm really happy about the score, but like I already hinted at, this definitely wasn't a cheap pickup. I have been there several times before, like I mentioned. This is my 3rd visit to this particular storage unit and this particular guy, and he's always been very nice to me, giving me a good sort of package deal for all this stuff. And last time I was there, I think I paid something like 160 euro for the lot that I got that time. And this time he essentially wanted a little more. So all of this stuff that I got today, all of the stuff that's on the table, this was essentially 200 euro in total. Now that is definitely a whole lot more than I was expecting to pay. But these books are so unusual. And like I said, I mean, we got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 books just in the BDSM category, like the Tortura Press and stuff like that. Like I said, I would generally say that these books are worth something like at least 30 euro per book. I think I could probably sell each book at 30 euro if I wanted to. So just selling those books would be more than what I've spent. I haven't really decided if I am to sell any of these, because I actually do quite like them and I think they're really collectible and cool. So I'm gonna think about it. Maybe I'll sell a couple, try to get some money's worth. Maybe I'll trade them for stuff. I don't know. But that is pretty much it today. So I definitely hope that you enjoyed this video. Leave a comment, leave a like, whatever. Check the video in the video description if you want to see some highly uncensored stuff from the Aero magazine series. And you will find that I've posted this on Twitter or x.com, because it's one of the few platforms that actually allows for fully uncensored nudity. But that's it. I want to say thank you very much for watching, and as usual, hope to see you all next time.